All right, candidates, all of you, of course, are seeking to join Rhode Island's congressional delegation, and the delegation has outsized influence over military policy in the U.S., of course, because Senator Jack Reed chairs the Armed Services Committee currently, as long as Democrats are in the majority. So I want to talk about defense spending, and I am going to start with you, Mr. Regenberg, on this. You tweeted out you support a bill called the People Over Pentagon Act, which my understanding is would reduce military spending by $100 billion, which is, I would say, a little over 10% of the current level of funding. Now, the defense industry is a key economic sector in the 1st District. Many people work for military subcontractors on Aquidneck Island in particular. Would you still support that bill, even if it were to cause job losses in Rhode Island?
I think there's an incredible amount of waste in the Pentagon budget. I don't think that our submarine fleet maintenance is in that waste, but I think there's a huge amount. I mean, we've got folks struggling with housing, with healthcare. We've got a climate crisis. And it feels like the only program that continues to go up and up in cost is the military budget. So I do think that we need to, this is about priorities. Do we care about people living on the street? Do we care about people struggling with health care? There's waste in there. I don't think that the electric boat, the programs that we have here in Rhode Island.
The electric boat, as far as I know, is almost entirely, if not entirely, in the 2nd District. I'm speaking of the subcontractors around Newport and Aquidneck Island. Just so I understand, are you saying you don't expect job losses with that level of cut, or it's a price to pay because you think that money should be shifted?
I wouldn't expect job losses.
You wouldn't. Okay. Mr. Berberk, I want to bring you into this because you've said publicly, you've also expressed concern about the country's current level of defense spending. Would you support cutting the military budget by $100 billion as would happen under that bill?
Yeah, we are approaching a $1 trillion defense budget. It's not sustainable. And I've spent my entire adult career working in the defense sector. And look, we've transitioned from ground wars in the Middle East, and we're reprioritizing our efforts on great power competition. And as a maritime nation, we've got to focus on the maritime, the air, the cyber and space domains, the future battlefields. And so I would be one of 2 Democratic veterans right now in Congress who would have voted against the NDAA because it doesn't address the long-term pacing threat of China, the most urgent threat of Russia, and we need to reduce. And I would actually be in favor of reducing the defense budget by 10% so that we can invest in the critical things like housing, healthcare, education, the things that are really going to define whether or not we remain an economic superpower.
And just for the voters at home, the NDAA is the National Defense Authorization Act, the big defense policy bill annually. Mr. Rahm, I'm going to go to you, and I'm going to let everyone in on this, of course. You talk often about your work for the Biden administration. Yes. We just heard from 2 people who say the defense budget is bloated and too big. Well, the president you worked for wants $877 billion for the military for the upcoming budget year. Do you support, and would you if in Congress, that level of defense spending?
Yeah, the world is unstable right now. I believe that we need to root out waste, fraud, and abuse wherever we can find it. And we can do that, and as long as we put some focus on it. But when we get to the point of 10% of jobs in Rhode Island are in the defense industry, 10% of our state's domestic products, that is important. And so those are families that I think about. And I think responsibility number 1 is protecting Rhode Islanders if you elect me to Congress, and I promise that I will do everything I can to protect those Rhode Island jobs. And if we need to make cuts, I still hear from people who experienced the naval base closures in the 70s here, and they still talk about the dramatic impact. So we need to do those cuts if necessary, if we find that waste, fraud, and abuse is prevalent, but we have to do it very responsibly, especially because the global theater is so unstable.
I want to bring in the left side of the stage. Ms. Montos, where are you on this request? The president wants $877 billion. Mr. Regenberg and Berberk have suggested $100 billion of that could be cut.
As of right now, I would not cut it because it's really hard to look at the military families that I work with as lieutenant governor and tell them that we're going to cut the budget, and they're going to be worried about, does that mean it's going to be less security for my loved one that are serving this country? Or we're going to tell the families of the Gold Star families that we're going to cut the military budget, and they're going to be thinking that this is what's going to put life at risk. We're going to be very careful when we talk about cutting the military budget. And right now, we need it because we're fighting for democracy in Ukraine. Russia continued to be a threat. China continued to be a threat. This is not the time to cut it.
Ms. Cano, same question. The $877 billion is what the president wants. Some candidates saying $100 billion off that. Where do you stand?
With a $6.27 trillion budget, there's no reason why we shouldn't have a strong military to protect our citizens and also prioritize services for our care economy, and for our priorities for working families. What we need to do is make sure we do look at the profit gouging, look at accountability measures, and as a member of the Finance Committee, I have done that here in Rhode Island, and I think that we need to send someone to Congress that is able to look at those things, and we could do both for our Rhode Island people, especially committing to the jobs that we need to protect here in our state.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, just want to make sure I understood. So you would support the 877. You think there's room elsewhere in the budget for other priorities?
100%.
Okay, Mr. Gonsalves.
I just want to say thank you to our veterans for all the work that they do and the valiant service that they show every day in Rhode Island. But what I would say is there's a lot of wasteful spending at the Pentagon. And there's also 800 lobbyists at the federal level, more for every single member of Congress. And I think we have to address this issue. We heard about the cost of living, we heard about housing, we heard about education. I want to invest on jobs and education instead of war and annihilation.
So, even Senator Reid talks about there being waste in the budget, but he is supporting this $877 billion bill to fund the Pentagon for next year. Would you vote for that bill, or would you be more with the $100 billion cut bill?
I would be looking at cuts. I think we need to think about what we need to do to keep our families safe, certainly abroad and here. But I think simultaneously we need to invest in education. We spend 10 times more on military than we do education in this country.
Mr. Casey, which side of the poll are you on this question?
I would support Senator Reid. What I want to do first, I would congratulate Gabe because he's getting better at the debates because he's using all my figures from the last debate. But here's the real rub. I think everybody is getting away from your question, and your question was, do you support cuts in the defense budget if it affects Rhode Island's economy? The answer is no, and it doesn't matter what district it's in, first or second district. There's 34,000 people employed in the defense industry. We have 1,200 businesses in Rhode Island that are secondary and tertiary to the big industries that we have here that support those businesses. We can't do that to the people of Rhode Island. They have enough issues now economically.
Ms. Casado, let me play you into this.
I would definitely go for the cut. I think we need to invest in our climate change, and that would bring good paid jobs to Rhode Island too. Then it's a lot of money that we waste in the Army, and we need to look into invest in education, invest in our a program to prevent more children dying for overdose. Then I think those are the money that we need to invest back to people and not just to the Army.
I have to admit, I'm not used to so many candidates being on stage that I can't tell the corners of my eye who has raised their hands. I think I saw you, Mr. Burbrick.
Yeah, just for clarification, one of the greatest threats to our country right now, and having spent the last 2 decades focusing, at the highest classification levels, is the threat in the undersea domain. And so, yes, it's important that we eliminate fraud, waste, and abuse and make cuts, but not at the expense of our submarine force.